Minnesota conservatives targeted at their homes. The recent rise in swatting and doxing, how the FBI and local law enforcement is responding. Next. Dustin Grage is my guest. He's Grage Dustin on X, known as Minnesota's GOP hype man and a columnist at Town Hall. Thanks for being here, Dustin. Glad you're okay after the weekend you have had, sir.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Liz, and appreciate all the prayers and support from everyone, including yourself.
Yeah, your family was the victim of swatting just this last weekend. So that's when someone attempts to send armed law enforcement to another person's house over a fake SWAT call. Just walk us through what happened.
Yeah, so what ends up happening is we end up getting probably a dozen phone calls in a row. And having been in the position that I have been in, this isn't an abnormal thing, but we usually just ignore the calls, block the numbers. Well, I'm glad we didn't this time because they ended up being calls from law enforcement. They had our phone numbers on file because we have had threats in the past. So I'm thankful that we actually had those. Normally, with a lot of these other swatters in the country, they're getting their doors knocked down or they're getting doors knocked. And, they actually have to have a physical interaction with the law enforcement officer before anything happens. We're fortunate to have had a phone conversation before anything actually had to occur. And that's thankfully because we had that relationship already. But that's how it started. But just to break down a little bit of the 911 phone call and what's all happening here, we do believe that this is a proxy attack on Elon Musk, going after people who he's engaged with over the past year throughout the election. And I happen to have been apparently ranked slightly high on this list. I'm not like high tier or anything, but I'm middle of the road in that regard. And I was an easy identifiable target. I had a public name associated to myself. I wasn't anonymous, and it was easy to target us. But what ends up happening is someone from a Google Voice number in California calls pretending to be me, that armed men that were masked stormed our home, killed my family, shot me in the leg, and eventually to the point, and they had several times where I hung up on this phone call. It wasn't obviously me, but at one point I was in my bedroom. Eventually, I barricaded myself into the bathroom, and they were in pursuit trying to kill me. And in the 911 phone call, they actually hear gunshots. But as my home is surrounded by law enforcement, they don't hear gunshots. So that was one bit that came later where they were like, okay, this is probably a swatting attempt. But the first one, obviously, is they had our phone numbers, and they were calling as me from a California number. So that was their first inkling of like, okay, go into this cautiously. And then later on, we're hearing gunshots, but there's no actual gunshots going off. And that's when it started to become very clear. But obviously, my wife and kids have been killed at this point. So when they call one of our numbers, because they have both our numbers on file, but my wife answers the phone, my wife's clearly not dead at this point either. Everything's completely de-escalated at this point. So that's what ends up happening. But yeah, in particular, we're seeing all males with Elon engaging with them in the middle of all of this Tesla violence and also Trump associations as well. And for lack of a better way to say it is just, yeah, it's a proxy attack against Elon, and we're just happen to get caught in the middle of it. But, we're happy to be safe, and we just hope that this doesn't continue. Each of these attacks, so far there's been 3 each night, all 2 hours apart in the proximity for time. We're all in different time zones in some cases, but it's only 2 hours in reality as these calls are occurring. And in some cases, we get pizza delivered to us after the attack. So
that's what I was going to say. This is 10:30 on a Saturday night or about that. And shortly after, you have all these pizzas delivered. This is horrifying, though, just the lengths that they're going to. I know on X you wrote, if you thought this would silence us, you couldn't be more wrong. You messed with the wrong family. Tell us more about what you can with the investigation. I want to be sensitive also, not be giving out your address or anything along those lines, but you do have a close relationship with law enforcement. I know you've given some advice to conservative folks in Minnesota as well to go ahead and start that relationship so they know that this could be a possibility.
Yeah, and quite frankly, while I do believe this is a part more of a national Elon Musk type of targeting, so in some regards, quote unquote, some people are safe, like they're not a threat in some of these scenarios. But in reality, we do have to be very, very wary of this still, because we have had state representatives, we've had local activists here in Wright County alone. I had a friend who was doxxed this week, as well as State Representative Walter Hudson. Walter Hudson's actually working on legislation right now, and we do plan on helping him with those efforts to get that passed and get to the governor's office to get signed for increased penalties on doxing as well as swatting. And we plan to testify in regard to that legislation, assuming that comes to light. But yeah, we do want to put as much effort into this as possible. We are good friends with the sheriff, good friends with our municipal department as well. And we do have contacts at the FBI. We have started to exhaust those now. We just actually got out of a meeting with Sheriff Derringer here in Wright County. And he's also taking these doxing instances very seriously. So for anyone who wants to think that they could just go dox anyone in Wright County, I mean, to think twice about it, because they're taking your threats very seriously, because this is what it comes to in the end. Yes, doxing starts out, just posting an address and letting people know where they live because you disagree with their politics. But then some people take those to the next extreme, and now you're putting people's lives at risk. And not just our families, but if I had pulled a gun and we were charged in, officers' lives are at risk. This also happened on the weekend of a St. Patrick's Day celebration in a nearby community. There's drunk drivers all around this night, and we're pulling a dozen officers off the road from patrols to be able to do this fake SWAT that might kill somebody. So this is a very serious matter. Yeah.
And it's been a serious matter, I think, for years in Minnesota. It's nice to know Representative Hudson, as you said, working through some legislative options at the moment. I know a thing or two about doxing and the home address deal myself. I also think this part is interesting. I checked with Representative Hudson just yesterday. I asked, hey, has any reporter contacted you in the Twin Cities about this situation to do a story? I'm curious, have any Twin Cities reporters contacted you, Dustin? You would think that this would be newsworthy, right?
Yeah, and it should be more newsworthy. I will say I have had a couple reach out personally and ask, and I probably will do some type of interview with them at some point. So there are some good ones out there, of course, but some are intentionally ignoring it. And there's absolutely zero doubt about that. People typically want to silence this stuff. Of course, if this happened to Ilhan Omar, I mean, God forbid, this would be blowing up right now. But it's, just another Republican activist who was doing all this stuff against their favorite governor that they were trying to hide dirt for years. So it's not the same ballpark in many regards. And they want this to kind of slide off. But we're not going to let that happen. We're going to pursue this at the state level. We're going to pursue this at the federal level. We're going to be in touch with a couple of congressmen here shortly to work on their swatting and doxing bills as well. And just make sure we get legitimate justice in all of these matters.
Yeah, FBI Director Kash Patel said just last week they're taking action to investigate this spike in swatting. They'll hold people responsible. People think, what harm could there be in this? U.S. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said that she's been swatted at least 8 times. I believe there was a deadly car crash due to one of those instances as police respond. Obviously, they take this very seriously. And there is bipartisan support, it seems, to stop this.
Yeah, which is excellent. And, it's happened here in Minnesota, too. And I'm in some ways thankful. Tom's a friend, and it's horrible that happened to him. But this happened with Representative Tom Emmer as well. He had a swatting incident here in Wright County, out in Delano. And because Wright County had been through that situation before, they knew that this can happen again. And even as I was doing a meeting with Sheriff Derringer earlier today, he was taking notes throughout the process as what we were explaining our experience and what worked effectively in terms of mitigation. And Then he gets to go into a command staff meeting here shortly and explain to his department heads and division heads on, hey, when this happens again, we have more information on how we can better this for next time. And quite frankly, I just think there needs to be more awareness of this. There's many departments in this country who don't even know what the term swatting is, or that this is even potentially a thing that could happen. I'm thankful for the Wright County Sheriff's Department and Buffalo PD for being able to attack this extremely well. And, there's trauma there too as well. In many ways, those officers had more trauma than us. We had members of the responding officers where, like, my wife graduated with, and they're hearing on a call that she's murdered, and that their son and our daughter, like, are friends, and potentially their son's friend is dead too. Like, imagine the trauma in that situation, and the caller saying, like, hey, come into this home to save these people, but you can't, and you're questioning yourself as law enforcement now. What happens when a real situation happens and they think it might be swatting? Now this reverse situation's happening where we might not be able to respond adequately for a real emergency now. And it's a travesty, but, there has to be more awareness on this and stricter penalties and more training for our law enforcement so everyone's ultimately safer.
Yeah, just despicable people who would do such a thing. But thank you again for speaking up. Dustin Grage, again, check him out. Grage Dustin on X. We're so glad you and your family are safe. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Liz.
That'll do it for this episode of Liz Collin Reports. We will see you next time.